Good afternoon. I got your homework. First time trying SAQ. Overall, not bad. Jeffrey, you provide way more than enough to get 3 out of 3. But good job. You have assertion, you have evidence, and then you have reasoning. But if you do that in SAQ section, all 9 sub questions together, you may end up writing a big essay. Okay, but if time is not a concern, sure, no problem. That you provide more than enough. All right. And Ria, you are right on topic. You got 3 out of 3. I already forward your homework to your TA. So you got assertion, evidence, and reasoning. Right. And Sunny, be careful. You chose 1A, right? It's described. So let's take a look at together of 1A. 1A is asking us for this question. This briefly describe one perspective, right? So this is what we need to identify about politics in the 1830s expressed in the image. All right. So that kind of require us to search our knowledge base, right? So what happened in 1830s? We know Andrew Jackson, well, he won the election in 1828, right? And he served 2 terms. That total together would be 8 years. So he retired at 1836, right? So that's those 8 years he was in the office. So that echoes this image, right? And then expressing the image right here. Remember we talk about that when it's a non-tax source, we focus on the center. So the center is a king figure. And here is King Andrew the First, right? And then underneath that, see he is trampling upon Constitution of the United States. That's one. Also, International Improvement U.S. Bank, Internal Improvement U.S. Bank, and here we have Judiciary of the United States. So these are our clue. Try to refresh your memory. Any specific events we can recall from these 3 items that Andrew Jackson tramples upon. We know this one, United States Constitution, right? That will be Indian Removal Act. Indian Removal Act. Yeah, we quickly went through this act yesterday, right? That's when John Marshall ruled that this act is unconstitutional, right? But Andrew Jackson was like a mocking John Marshall, right? Yeah, he can declare unconstitutional as he wants, but let's see what he can do about it, right? So he not only violate United States Constitution, but at the same time, he is kind of oppressed upon this judiciary of the United States, right? So he violated 2 things. One is Constitution. The other is the spirit of American government, the federalism, check and balance, right? So the only power Supreme Court has to check upon executive is to declare the president's action decision unconstitutional, right? And John Marshall used that power and said that this Indian Removal Act indeed is unconstitutional. But Jackson ignored that ruling, right? So that explains these 2 items that he trampled upon. And this one, we did not cover that. The bank. It's actually known as Andrew Jackson's War on Banks, all right? We mentioned that Andrew Jackson is the first common man that secured this presidency in United States history, right? And like every other common man, he hated those social elites use their power or even abuse their power to seek for their personal interest. And good example would be the National Bank. Okay, National Bank. Remember the first National Bank was actually proposed by Alexander Hamilton, right? And then eventually being supported by George Washington. So by that, America's first national bank was established. Then when the year comes to 1816, a second Bank of the United States was established, right? So ideally, this is a national bank, right? But the person in charge kind of like wrong it as a private bank, because this national bank, their business is open to the government only, or sometimes is to the commercial bank, right? So when we talk about bank, there are three different kinds, right? So bank, we have national, we have national, and then we have commercial, okay, and then we have insurance. Right? So national, their clients, it's state government, and sometimes is commercial bank, right? And commercial bank, their clients, business, right? And household individual, right? And insurance, as literally, they deal with insurance only, right? So these two banks, if as an individual we only deal business with commercial bank. If we go to any national bank, they'll say, thank you for coming, bye, have a nice day, because they do not open business to any individual households, right? So their job mainly is, number one, regulate money supply, right? Number two, deposit the taxation, the tax revenue, right? And number three is to print money, right? And number four is to regulate commercial bank. That's national bank's job, all right? So it's a government-owned bank, but government would authorize a private institution to run this bank for the government, all right? And as a result, this person appointed by the government, he actually run it like a private bank, because the deposit from the federal government, right, and the deposit from state government, he actually loaned it out to make interest, and then he used the interest revenue to invest on other financial sector to make a profit. All right. So it's a you can claim that this person is abuse of his power. You can say that. Okay, so Andrew Jackson was not happy about that. Okay, but this national bank was kind of protected by the law, right? Ever since Alexander Hamilton proposed the first national bank, right? And the president approved of that, right? But what happened was 1816, right? This second Bank of the United States was established, and their charter, okay, their charter means a business license, right? Their charter was about to expire, right? So they had to renew. When this bank was established, Andrew Jackson was not the president, right? So that was 1816. So Andrew Jackson was not happy about it, but he couldn't do anything because he had no power. When the year came to 1832, this second National Bank of the United States, they were about to renew their charter, right? And look at that time, who was in the office? Andrew Jackson, right? So Jackson was ready to take a revenge upon this evil banks. So he refused to renew the charter. And if you just take a closer look of this year, 1832, it can be divided by 4 evenly, right? So whenever the year can be divided by number 4 evenly, that will be the presidential election year, because that's every year, every 4 years, right? Well, in that case, Andrew Jackson idea and criticize this corrupt capitalists, social elites big time, and he people, right? So he won his second term, and when he won the second term, the second National Bank of the United States knew exactly, man, we're toast. Okay, and yeah, they're right. So Andrew open private small banks to support the economy, right? So he's the president, all right, but he could not manipulate the bank's fund because the president does not have the power of wallet, right? So he had to go to his Secretary of State. So the first Secretary of State he went to, he demanded his Secretary of State to withdraw all the federal government's deposit from this bank, all right? So tending to bankrupt this bank, right? But the Secretary of State says, Mr. President, I cannot do that. I do not have the right. That power of wallet belongs to Congress, not mine, right? So Andrew Jackson wasn't happy, and he ended up, relocate this Secretary of State, just, demote him, right? So he promoted the second one to this position, and the second Secretary of State, the Andrew Jackson approached to him and said, I want you to withdraw all the federal deposit from this national bank. And the second secretary said, Mr. President, I have no power to do so, right? So Andrew Jackson fired him, all right? And the third, okay, knew what happened to the first two secretaries. So the third was actually prepared, right? So when Andrew Jackson came to this third Secretary of State and demand the same thing, right? Say, I want you to withdraw all the federal deposit from this bank. And this new secretary said, oh, Mr. President, I'm happy to do so. Okay. And he actually did. All right. Of course, he used some kind of, a connection and made it happen. And then Andrew Jackson actually ended up, terminate this second national bank of the United States, all right, and started to establish supporting this private bank establishment, right? And that's why he called his PAP bank, okay, serve for the purpose to help Andrew Jackson for running the government, right? So that's what this is about, internal improvements U.S. bank, right? So he kind of abused his, sorry, can claim that he kind of abused his presidential power to force his Secretary of State to do what he wants, and in a in the gray zone, okay, somehow it's illegal way, right? But again, he's a tough president, right? Whenever Andrew Jackson claims that he wants to do something, he normally will make it happen, right? So these come to this public's opinion towards this president and say, we have a King Andrew the First, right? So his power even is considered as a superior to Constitution. And he break this check and balance federalism government structure, right? So this is what this painting is about, right? So with that in mind, for question A, I will suggest you to answer the question in this way. First of all, your assertion is gonna be the perspective. This will be your assertion, all right? So this is your assertion. You need evidence, right? So evidence is politics. So you think about any politics as your evidence. So here are 3 clues for you, all right? Just make sure you must fit into this timeline. Your evidence must come from 1830s, right? So this national bank is 1832, that work, right? And this Indian Removal Act is 1830, that also work, and that related to this judiciary of the United States, that also work. So either one of these 3 will help you to provide an evidence, and the evidence is indeed from this image, right, along with your own knowledge, right? So you can say in the image, right, Andrew Jackson is portrayed as a King Andrew the First. This is strongly against Americans' democracy as a federalism government since 1789, right? That's your assertion. So perspective is he is the opposite of Americans' government structure, federalism, and Americans' regime type democracy, right? So that's your assertion. And then your evidence, you can talk about how he abuses power, right? to remove this second national bank, or you can talk about his Indian Removal Act, right? So this will be your evidence. In his first term, Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act. Okay, with this act, specific act, that's your evidence already, right? So he signed this Indian Removal Act, okay, forcing 5 Indian tribes to relocate from their previous reservation land, right? This act is obviously violating the Constitution, right? The constitutional rights of Indian society. Despite John Marshall, the Chief Justice of Supreme Court, rule that this act is unconstitutional, Andrew Jackson went ahead and ratified and exercised this act. All right, so that's your evidence. So you have evidence, you describe it, right? Now you need a reasoning to link your evidence back to your assertion, right? So with this violating of Constitution, and you can have a break it, like, you know, Constitution being trampled by Andrew Jackson, right? And then Andrew Jackson is perceived as a king instead of president. That would be your answer for question A. Even though it's described, right? But you're gonna locate the perspective related to politics in this time period. So this politics is gonna be your evidence, and your evidence can come from any one of these 3. That makes sense, Sunny? Sunny?
Yes, makes sense.
Thank you. All right, so that's my suggestion for your answer, okay, for 1A. Also, when we write short answer questions, try to write in third person's point of view, okay, instead of first person. Okay, I suggest, I recommend avoid using the pronoun I, all right? So from a third person's point of view, reporting a historical event, all right? And both Ria and Jeffrey, you chose B, right? And you both nailed it, good job. So we need to briefly explain one specific event or development that led to the perspective expressed in the image. So the perspective is Andrew Jackson somehow, you can say, ruin or destroy Americans' democracy or Americans' government structure. You can say that. And what event that lead to the general public belief that Andrew Jackson is responsible for doing so. And you can talk about, once again, any one of these 3 will do. And if you talk about this Tariff Act, that also work, right? So this Tariff Act, by Constitution, yes, the state government does have their right, okay, in economy, as long as it's not interstate, right? If it's not interstate, and then it's not the federal government's jurisdiction, all right? So use that as your example, that work. Or you use Indians Removal Act, that also work. Or his war against national bank, that also work, okay? Or his reaction to John Marshall's ruling, that also work as your claim. At the same time, evidence, all right? So that's question B. Question C, because it's, you know, post Andrew Jackson's era, we did not cover that yesterday, but we are going to today. Just give you a spoiler alert. If we want one specific effect, right? So that's consequences of the political developments. So political developments, something changed, right? Something happened due to Andrew Jackson's, you know, government type, right? So what happened was Andrew Jackson, Democratic Republican president. Remember this one? Democratic Republican. That was founded by Thomas Jefferson after George Washington retired. And the opponents will be Federalist, right? Federalist. And established, founded by Alexander Hamilton with John Adams' help. John Adams, all right? Okay. What year was that? 1792. But 1792, Washington was still in the office, right? He retired in 1796. So 1792, yes, political party was sort of kind of funded, but not like, in public. There are two different group of politicians. They are against each other's ideology. The public know that. But officially there's no this party, that party, because George Washington discouraged political party, right? So after George Washington retired, the party's activity become more much more busier, right? So 1792 all the way to 1824. 1824. A Democratic Republican remained the same, nothing changed. But Federalist, by 1824, Federalist Party was marginalized. Why? Since 1800, the revolution of 1800, remember the election? Thomas Jefferson won, right? And that would be Democratic Republican Party's victory. And then that's the third, right? Third president, Democratic Republican from Virginia. And he served 2 terms, right? That's 8 years. Then fourth president, 1808, was James Madison. Madison also served 2 terms. That's another 8 years, right? 1808, I'm sorry, 08. And then the fifth is James Monroe, 1816. He won the election and he served 2 terms again. So 8 years, right? So third, fourth, and fifth president, these 3 presidents, they're all Democratic Republican. Also, they're all from Virginia. So starting from 1800 till James Monroe retired in 1824. So these 24 years in American history, we kind of nickname it as Virginian Dynasty. Virginian Dynasty. What happened to American democracy, right? Because they're all Democratic Republican. They also happen to be all from Virginia. So we call that Virginian Dynasty. So this 24 years, Federalist Party gradually being marginalized. They became irrelevant in the government. So by 1824, this party kind of disappeared, gradually fade into history. So now the second generation, formed a new party called National Republican. National Republican. So National Republican was formed to replace Federalists, but they continue to practice the same ideology: big government, high taxation. Who formed this National Republican? John Adams' son, Quincy Adams. So Quincy Adams, along with Henry Clay. Remember Henry Clay? Henry Clay. He was the one that went to South Carolina for this tariff compromise, right? So that's him. So they together formed National Republican, all right? But National Republican soon experienced internal conflicts. Why? Because National Republican Party, their members are from both North and South, right? And remember Andrew Jackson, when the year comes to 1828, Andrew Jackson came up with this Tariff Act, right? So high tariff to protect the northern industry, right? So of course, this act was highly supported in the North, but severely criticized in the South, right? So some Southern members in this National Republican Party, they are opposing this Tariff Act, while the Northern member in this National Republican Party, they kind of support it. So you see, this party itself, has this internal conflicts. So gradually, this party, again, divided. So another party was formed. That party is called Whig. Okay, this party still exists, Whig. Okay, so Whig party was formed in 1836. Right, so they continue Federalist Party's ideology, and this National Republican Party faded away. So who formed it? Whig? Again, the same individual right here, Quincy Adams and Henry Clay. And Whig Party, actually, they won 4 presidential elections till 1854. This Whig Party had its internal conflicts, just like a National Republican. But this time it's not because of tariff anymore. This time it's over a slavery issue. Look at the year, close to the Civil War, right? So this time, the internal conflicts within Whig Party is over slavery issue. So slavery issue, the North, of course, anti-slavery, the South, pro-slavery, right? So this time, the internal conflicts lead to this party being divided into 3. Okay, some people remain in Whig and they continue to exist till today. And a group of people left Whig and formed the party is called Know Nothing. Know Nothing, right? That's what they call themselves, Know Nothing, right? They have no strong opinion towards slavery, but they did have strong opinion towards immigration. Okay, they're anti-immigrants, right? And then we have another group of people from Whig Party. They form Republican. Yep, this Republican is the modern days Republican, the very same one. Okay, Republican. So the history of Republican Party would be from 1854 till today. And how about modern days Democrats? Well, so very beginning is Democratic Republican, right? And when Andrew Jackson was in office, all right, it's sort of like authoritarian government style, kind of drive away some of this Democratic Republican Party. So some of them actually left Democratic Republican and joined Whig, and some of them formed a new party called Democrats. Democrats, right? So yep, that's the very same Democrats we have today. So Democrats, it's a result of Andrew Jackson's violating Constitution, trample upon national bank, okay, and then violating this, check and balance, okay, government structure. So that's how Democrats was formed, right? And so you can trace Democrats' history all the way back to Andrew Jackson's era, right? So that's the current political party. One, Democrats back to Andrew Jackson's era, and now the Republican we have right today, you can trace it back to 1854. And normally we would say Lincoln's Republican, because when the Republican was established, the first president they won, okay, was Abraham Lincoln in 1860. That's why they say Lincoln's Republican, right? And Republican, they will say from Lincoln to Trump. Lincoln was the first Republican president, and Trump so far is the last. Yeah, the last, because Biden is Democrats, right? So Republicans history, you can say from Lincoln to Trump, right? Well, that explains the political party. So that would be one specific effect of political development referenced by the image. You can claim that a new political party was formed called Democrats. And then we also have a new political party formed called Whig. See that year, right? So a new political party system, that would be your claim, right? So specific effect, well, America had a new political party system, okay, as a result of Andrew Jackson's, this authoritarian style government, right? So that would be your answer to question C. All right. And today we're gonna practice one more SAQ. All right. So this will be your homework today for your SAQ. Yesterday, the first SAQ we practiced non-tax, right? And today we're gonna practice tax. And then you will see a pair of excerpt, right? And if you look at the ear, you know this is a secondary source, right? Because it's someone write about some historical topic in modern days, right? So this is secondary. So they express their opinion towards a certain topic. So here we have 3 questions. Okay, once again, it's or, just one paragraph, right? So if you choose A, briefly describe one major difference between these 2 authors, their historical interpretation of the Civil War. We'll cover Civil War today, all right? So in this case, you need to find one major difference. And what about your evidence? So your evidence will be from the source in this case. But the evidence, you're gonna provide reasoning, right? So reasoning is the time that require your knowledge towards this topic being discussed. That is Civil War. All right. So if you choose 1A, you're gonna find one major difference. Okay, these 2 authors have towards Civil War, right? And then your evidence is no, why you believe this is the difference. That's from the source. But your reasoning part will involve your knowledge of Civil War. Like, you know, Potter views Civil War as the continuity of conflicts between North and South, right? War indicates that's the beginning of the division within the nation. Okay, and that evidence will be obvious. Civil War. All right. Okay, so this is where we stop. We cover Andrew Jackson here yesterday, right? So we talk about his tariff act, right? And we also talk about these 3 very controversial controversial act during his presidency, right? Among which this Indian Removal Act would be like, you know, the most criticized presidential conduct, right? And so these 5 Indian tribes, they were forced to relocate to in the middle of nowhere, really in the middle of nowhere, okay? And they have to abandon their, you know, home because their home discovers gold, right? And you know how they relocate? They walk. They really walk. So they walk all the way, okay, from the east to the center, the mountain time zone right here, right? So during their journey, their migration to their new home, many Indians failed to survive. They died, like, you know, the elderly, okay, the sick, okay, the young, all right? So along their migration trail, you see many Indian souls being buried along this way, right? So this trail is actually known as Trail of Tears. Trail of Tears. If you heard this term, that refers to this Indian Removal Act, Trail of Tears. And they were actually forced to move. How? Andrew Jackson sent federal army, not militia, federal army to supervise this relocation. All right, and then the federal army showed no mercy towards these Indians. Right. So actually, Chrysler has this what is that, SUV? Is that Chrysler? Yeah, Cherokee or Jeep, right? Cherokee, Grand Cherokee. That model actually was the meant to honor these Indians, right? The Trail of Tears. Okay, so that's Andrew Jackson. Now let's go back to Thomas Jefferson. We skipped him yesterday. Well, the Revolution of 1800 witnessed the first time peaceful transfer of power, right? Not a single bloodshed happened. And then Andrew Jackson, once he secured his presidency and he served the office, he becomes super popular. Why? Because number one, he was the father of democracy, right? And people love him. He promoted the idea of small government and low taxation, right? And he also managed to pay the national debt. Remember the 1800 election, we talk about one of the many factors that lead to John Adams' defeat was the national debts increase, right? So Thomas Jefferson, as soon as he was in the office, he started to figure out how the federal government can decrease this national debt, and he figured out a way. He downsized the government. He actually downsized the government. All right, how? He shut down, in his mind, unnecessary government bureaucracy agencies. All right, he believed with our territory, okay, that's the original 13 states plus the land they claimed from England, right, after the Revolutionary War. He believed with the size and population America had at that time, America did not need such a huge government, right? So he shut down many branches, right? And then that managed to reduce the national debt from $83 million to $45 million. So he did that in 8 years. So he paid off almost $40 million, right? So because of that, he was like a beloved by the public, right? And he also made a decision to purchase Louisiana. We talk about that in first class meeting, right? That's how America managed to expand her territory one more time, right? So this Louisiana purchase, once again, make the general public even love him more. So his legitimacy was actually very high, okay, in his first term, right? And that enabled him to win his second term, right? So Louisiana purchase, he made it. But actually, there's a side story. When Andrew Jackson decided to purchase this land, right? Because it's like a one-time opportunity, okay? You cannot seize it. But he was in this dilemma. Why? Because remember his debate with Alexander Hamilton towards this national bank issue? And this national bank issue result in this debate on how to interpret Constitution, right? So in this case, Thomas Jefferson support the idea of strict interpretation towards Constitution, remember? All right, but Alexander Hamilton say loosen, right? And now Thomas Jefferson wanted to buy Louisiana, and he started to study Constitution. And none of the 7 articles mentioning that the government has the power to purchase land. No. You can declare war, and if you win over the war, you can annex land. That's no problem. That's indicated in Constitution. But buy land? No, Constitution doesn't say so. So Thomas Jefferson said, uh-oh, what comes around goes around, right? So Jefferson had to make a decision. If I decided to purchase this land, I kind of like challenge my strictly interpreted, right? But he believed that buying this land will bring big interest benefit to the country as a whole. So he risked his being impeached. Okay, this possibility, he go ahead and buy it anyway, right? And then this decision actually pleased the general public. Okay, so nobody was really like have the desire or intention to impeach bullet, right? So this is the Louisiana Purchase, 1803. And this is the Lewis and Clark exploration, right? So Lewis and Clark was, Thomas Jefferson appointed his personal secretary, not secretary, not in the cabinet, right? It's just his personal secretary, Louis, to conduct this exploration. Why? Because Louis was an expert, okay, botanist, right? So it makes sense to send Louis to for this exploration because he could study, right, the soil, the plants, and determine what kind of land America has right now. But Louis was a scholar. He was not a explorer, right? So he invited Clark to accompany him. That's why we have this Lewis and Clark exploration. Okay, so that's their journey, starting from St. Louis, right at the old border with the French colony, but now it's American territory. So they took off from St. Louis, and if they could take the waterway, they take the waterway all the way until they couldn't, and they will travel by land, right? And this was considered as like an epic journey because they neither of these two gentlemen had any idea what they're going to encounter. No, not at all. All right. And they could be encountered with like wild animals, Indians attacked, right? And unpredictable mother nature. So they need some kind of, tour guide. So they hired Sakajawa, right? It's a she, all right? So these two men hire a Indian tour guide, woman, right? Sakajawa. She was a Shoshan Indian, and she actually helped Lewis and Clark safely travel through Indian tribes, all right? And if some Indian tribes show like a hostility, and then Sakajawa will help to negotiate with these Indian tribes because they speak the same language, right? So that's safer. Okay, so this journey took 2 years to complete a round trip, right? So when they finally arrive here, Fort Cleston, okay, and in Louis's diary, he said, "Alas, ocean in view." Right? So he knew he reached the west coast of this continent. And along his journey, he discovered many, many new plant species. And he also collects samples. If the plants he could not, bring with him as a too big, too large, and he would just, draw it on his diary. So whatever they discovered is evident that it's gonna help Americans' economy. Because number one, the soil was so fertile. Number two, various kind of new plant species that can help America as well, their industry, right? Manufacturing industry. And on top of that, beaver, right? Beaver, the pelt would be super valuable to European market, all right? So this is Lewis and Clark's exploration. So after their journey, when they return and report what they discovered to Thomas Jefferson still the president, right? He served 2 terms. And Thomas Jefferson said, thank God, okay? If this land is like in the poor land, okay, worthless, then just wait and see American public. They will be very practical. They will start to criticize Thomas Jefferson's purchase, right? All right, and Thomas Jefferson so far so supported by the general public, right? But after all, he was, a human being as well. So he made a mistake as well. Here comes to the embargo of 1807. We started with this term first. Embargo of 1807 is what? Remember we mentioned that after the independence, Britain actually tried very hard to harass America, right? Not only they encourage Indians at the borderline between Canada and America to rebel, to fight against America. Britain also constantly harassed Americans' commercial boat, right? So to a point, Thomas Jefferson decided, fine, we are going to practice this embargo. Embargo means that they're going to shut down their ports. No more imports and exports, right? So Thomas Jefferson's logic is like that. If America shut down ports, that means America will no longer exporting cotton, right? So the major commodity America exports that time would be cotton, all right? Accompanied with some manufactured goods from the north, right? So Thomas Jefferson believed once America stopped exporting cotton, that it will hurt Europeans' economy. Because European, look at the time, 1807, European already, okay, in the later year of their first wave of industrialization. So Europeans, they already use machine to replace human labor, so they can mass produce textile clothes, right? And in order to produce this textile clothes, they need to buy raw material cotton from America. So Thomas Jefferson believed that with this embargo act, that will force Britain to compromise and negotiate with America, right? Because no, Britain needed Americans' cotton. So Jefferson was pretty confident about that though. But as a result, Britain did not compromise, okay? Because Britain was like, you're not exporting cotton, okay? Then we'll just simply buy from Egypt, because Egypt also produced cotton. So Jefferson actually helped Egyptians' economic development, right? And so his embargo ended up as a backfire. Not only Britain did not compromise, but Americans' economy was affected big time. So this embargo hurt Americans' economy. All right. So this political cartoon, now it makes sense, right? It refers to the Jefferson's embargo of 1807, right? So this is Jefferson, this is Merchant, right? And then his act kind of, slowed down Americans' market, right? And with the boat park off the coast, right? So there's no more business activity here. So Jefferson was depicted like, a tortoise, right? That hide America's market growth, right? And when you see that, oh, that's about embargo act, right? But other than that, this is his one of his major mistake. And kind of like, his supporting rate with this embargo 1807, 08, declined big time. All right. So through that, you can tell American society still is very practical. Okay. They could change their attitude towards a particular politician due to one specific act, right? So that's embargo of 1807. And then we have the expansion westward. This expansion westward is a result from this Louisiana purchase, right? So Jefferson, when he was in the office, farmers, they could send their goods, right, down the Mississippi River. Why? Because now they own this Louisiana, right? So if you go back and look at this map, this is Mississippi River, right? So with the purchase of this land, Mississippi River also goes this way. It's also Mississippi River, right? So now used to belong to France, now it's Americans' territory, right? So farmers, they can utilize the entire Mississippi River all the way to New Orleans. Remember this Pinckney's Treaty with Florida during George Washington's presidency, right? So managed to secure Americans' rights to utilize Mississippi River within Florida's territory, right? Okay, so now farmers enjoy the whole Mississippi River. It goes from the what was it? The north, the center north, all the way to East Coast, right? So because of that, economy started to thrive, that's for sure, right? And farmers, they send what kind of goods? First, because Lewis and Clark, they discover all the beavers, right, along Mississippi River, and then grains and tobacco, all right, down the Mississippi River and through New Orleans. That's made available through Pinckney's Treaty with Florida, right? And facilitating transportation to Europe, of course, so they can ship out their goods from Florida right here, right? Instead of like, taking the land transportation, right? So what's so important about that? That lead to this expansion westward movement. So between 1800 to 1848. This period is known as the westward expansion. 1800 to 1848, right? Westward expansion, right? And this westward expansion lead to various historical development. The first development would be what? This Thomas Jefferson's, Thomas Jefferson's Democratic Republican Party, right? Marginalized Federalist political party, right? Because this land was purchased under Democratic Republican government, right? And people support that. People feel grateful to this government. And on top of that, Jefferson managed to decrease the national debts, right? And later, he managed to double America's territory, right? So all this is kind of, make the general public believe in Thomas Jefferson's Democratic Republican Party's ideology. So that would marginalize Federalist Party, all right? So that's the second development. First is the westward expansion, and Americans started to move to the west, okay, and utilize the land. So population change, the first political development. Second is the marginalized Federalist Party, right? Third is what? Because of this expansion, right? So more farmers, they move to the west. So what kind of farmer you think will be willing to move to the west? Large plantation owner or small farmers? Jefferson, keep calling you Jefferson. Jeffrey, what do you think? Big farmer or small farmer will be more likely to move to the west?
Definitely small farmers, because they would probably be looking, big farmers are probably just settled down already. Small farmers want to have a better opportunity to become a big farmer.
There you go, right? Because the government encouraged people to move westward, right? So in order to encourage people to do so, accompanied policies is a must, right? And that time, if you have the courage to move to the west, oh, you can claim lands. Some lands are even free, all right? If if you have to buy from the government, and still a very, very low price, right? So these small farmers, they went to the west, right? So they started from ground zero, and of course they are against this already exist big farmers, right? And these big farmers, they could grow bigger and bigger, right? Because they had slavery system, right? So these small farmers moved to the west. They're definitely anti-slavery, right? Anti-slavery, right? So this tension between the North and the South over slavery issue gradually emerged, all right? It was there before, okay? You can trace all the way back to the colonial era. It was there, but now it's more obvious. Why? Because with this westward expansion, right? More states were established. And then when new states, when the territory qualified as a state, mainly is their population, right? And they could appeal to the federal government and join the union as a state. The difference between territory and state is territory, they do not have autonomy. They will be under the neighboring states' supervision. And they have no representatives in the Congress. No, not at all, right? But once they are a state, they can have their own state government, their state constitution, right? And they can have seats in the Congress, right? So to fight for the new joined states, right, as either slavery or free, it matters because America is bicameral, right? So bicameral government indicates what? There are two houses in the parliament, not parliament, in the Congress, right? So these two houses, House of Representative is based on each state's population, okay? So if the population is high, then they have more seats in the House of Representatives, right? And vice versa. However, in the House of Commons, it's a fixed number, right? Each state possess 2 seats in House of Senate, right? Not a common, I'm sorry. Senate, right? It's the upper house. So in this case, if there are more slavery states than free states, then this house, upper house, the Senate, all right, would be dominated by slavery states. That's why the North and the South, they care about the new territory when they join the Union. What kind of state are you? Pro-slavery or anti-slavery, right? So this issue will be gradually being intensified, all right, and eventually lead to this bleeding Kansas, and lead to this compromise of 1850, and lead to this tension between the North and South over slavery, and eventually become civil war, right? So that's the expansion of westward. The political development derived from this westward expansion, right? Number one, population change, right? Relocation, migration. Number two, marginalized political party. Which one? Federalist. Number three, the conflicts between the North and the South due to the new states being formed, right? Number four, it lead to this, what we call sectionalism. Sectionalism, right? What is sectionalism? Sectionalism is because of this westward expansion, right? So now America kind of like, divided into 3 sections. The New England, the North, all right? New England is considered as the North, right? So the very original Mayflower colony, right? So the New England. And then the West is called the Westerners, right? The Westerners. And the South, right? So sectionalism refers to these 3 different regions, right? New England, they are equal to the North, all right? And the large plantation landowners in the South, all right? And then we have the Westerners, the West, right? So these 3 regions, each one of them have a different motivation and agenda. The North continue their manufacturing, right? And with the help of industrialization that America learned from Britain, right? So the economy in the North was growing, okay? And to a point, we started to have the new social class being introduced to American society called the middle class, the middle class. So middle class is what? They are not like in the South, the big plantation landowner, but they're not like, in the West, these small farmers, the Westerners, right? But they are factory owners, right? Because now America is industrialized, right? So factory owners, they are anti-slavery for sure, okay, because they're New England, right? And then, so where did they get the labor force? Free labor. So they hire workers, right? So workers, where did American society find all these workers on the farmers? Used to be, okay? But after this industrialization, farming industry started to adopt machines to replace human labor, right? So with the demand for farmers decrease, these farmers, they had to use, especially the younger generation, right? So they had to find a new job. So they came to this urban area, and then started to work in the factories. So we have a new social class called middle class emerged, and at the same time working class, right? Their ideology over slavery is what? Against slavery, because they advocate Mayflower's belief, right? Equality, freedom, democracy. Okay. And the West, we have this small farmers, right? Self-made men, and try to establish themselves in American society, right? So these Westerners, they're also anti-slavery, but on top of that, they are not immigrants friendly, not immigrants friendly, right? Because immigrants, they come to America seeking for American dream, right? So that could be their potential competitor, right? And the immigrants, if they came from the East Coast, they came from the Europe, right? Mainly like, Ireland, Germany, okay? Because that time, Ireland experienced this potato famine, and Germany, okay, they have problem with this Napoleon's war, right? So they left Europe and came to America, right? That's the Westerners. So most immigrants, Irish immigrants, when they arrive in America, they arrive from the East Coast for sure. And they tend to settle down in the East Coast, in the New England area, and became workers working in the factories. They had enough of being farmers, because being farmers, your future is unpredictable. It depends on, how God, decide. If you have like, drought, you have like, a flood, right? And then you lose all your crops that you have been working so hard this season, right? So they decided, nah, no more farming. We're going to work in the factory, more reliable, right? And German immigrants, they were also peasants, right? Had enough of this Napoleon War, so they left Europe and came to America, right? So German peasants came to America with the ambition to own land, because back home in Germany, there's no way they could have own any land. So they heard that this westward expansion, that's the opportunity for them to come to America and claim land. So there's no way they can claim land in the East Coast, right? It was already developed in this manufacturing industry. So German immigrants tend to, travel from East Coast to the West for this free land, right? That's German immigrants, right? So with Irish in the East Coast, provide labor force to the factories, and German immigrants march to the West and claim land, all right? So that's what happened in the West. And so this West American farmers, they are not a big fan of these immigrants, right? And the other region in the South, they are definitely pro-slavery, because their economic system rely heavily upon it, right? So that's the South. That's a sectionalism. So sectionalism indicates that America now, I'm not talking about political divided, all right? But this economic system, this ideology, belief, kind of, divide America into three sections. That's what we call sectionalism, right? And each one of them have their own agenda and have their own economic practice, right? And that gradually will become like the North versus the South, right? Because the West, they're also anti-slavery because they're small farmers, all right? So that's the fourth political development due to this expansion westward. Number five, the political development will be the market revolution. Not political, I should say economic development is market revolution. So you probably heard about this market revolution, right? So market revolution is what? America, as we mentioned earlier, started from this westward expansion, right? America attract immigrants. So Americans' labor force is pretty abundant. They don't have to worry about, shortage of laborers. And then plus America learned this concept of industrialization from Britain, right? So America's economy improved big time, right? So market revolution, okay, what is about market revolution? Number one, a new way of production was introduced to American market. That is what we call interchangeable parts. Interchangeable parts, right? Meaning what? This is basically how manufacturer does as of today. For example, if your phone, the screen of your phone somehow is broken, right? Do you need to get a new phone? No, you just replace the screen, right? Because the screen is standardized manufacturing. So you can always buy a new screen according to the model of your phone, and you replace it. There you go. you have a brand new force, sort of, right? But back to the time before market revolution, no way, because manufacturing is pretty much the expert's job. Everything was like, man-made before America marginalized the industry, right? So man-made, what happened? You need like, this master in production, right? Like you buy a chair, you buy from a carpenter. So the chair from beginning to finish is made by this expert, this master, this carpenter, right? Well, in that case, if the one of the leg of your chair broke, then you have no choice but to buy a new one. You cannot just replace the leg of the chair. That makes sense. So interchangeable parts really change how the consumers spend their money, right? So they don't have to buy new stuff if the old breaks. They just need to buy parts and replace the parts, all right? And that also improved the production. Why? Because now the production can be break down to parts, right? And workers, they just need to learn how to, make one part of the entire production. So it's manageable. If you need to learn every parts of this production, it's gonna take your years, right? If not decades. But this interchangeable parts enable the workers, okay, to contribute to Americans' industrialization. So they just need to know how to make this particular part, and that's it. Okay. So market revolution, number one is what? Interchangeable parts. Number two is this idea of cash crop started to prevalent in America, right? So farmers no longer just farm for food crops and for their own family. They farm cash crop like tobacco, coffee, tea, right? Sugar, right? So this is cash crop. So after harvest, these farmers, they can sell their crops in the market, and they can even sell further down south or further up north, right? Because we have this Mississippi River as a transportation mean, right? So market revolution, one, we have interchangeable parts. Two, we have this cash crop, okay? And then three is consumers, theory. So the market now is dominated by the consumers' demand, okay? Consumers' demand. So what to produce, how much to produce is based on the consumers' demand, right? So used to be supply side economy, now it's demand side economy, all right? And Thomas Jefferson supports a supply side economy, but because of this, westward expansion, market revolution, so the American market become like, led by demand. So consumers' demand will determine what to produce, how much to produce, and what the market price will be. Okay, so those are all effect due to the westward expansion. It makes sense. So we have political development, we have social development, sectionalism, we have economic development, market revolution, right? So this could be a big topic in your SAQ, because now we're in unit 5 already, right? So in this the end of unit 4 towards the beginning of unit 5, right? So it's the focus of AP exam, right? So this unit, the big idea definitely is the westward expansion, no doubt. But because of this westward expansion, America's society, economy, politics change big time. Okay, so that would be a cause effect or continuity and change topic. All right, so that's the expansion westward and embargo of 1807. All right, keep going. Now, Jefferson, like George Washington, also retired after the second term, right? And then third is what? Is Jefferson's Secretary of State, James Madison. So Madison won the election in 1808, no problem, because Jefferson was a popular president. And during his presidency, Americans' economy was actually thriving. So here's always like an indicator to predict the next presidential election. if the incumbent president, okay, managed to develop the economy, right? And this very president has a pretty high chance to secure the second term, right? But if this is already the second term, whoever this president endorsed from his or her political party, very likely gonna win over this election because the public believe in this government, right? This government provide prosperity, right? So we want them to continue, right? And then they will vote for the candidate that endorsed by the president, right? And the president definitely will endorse his or her, political party member, right? Okay, so 1808, Thomas Jefferson endorsed, right? Endorsed Madison, and of course Madison won, right? And he served 2 terms all the way to 1816. But towards the end of his first term, he decided, okay, enough is enough. Remember how Britain constantly harassed Americans' commercial boat, right? And provoke Indians attack Americans' village, cities, towns, right? So Washington sent Jay to sign this Jay's Treaty, right? And Jefferson practiced embargo, right? So you see America initially tried to, back off, right? And try to swallow their pride, right? And to compromise, fine, okay, we won't argue with you because we are not ready for another war, right? But when the time comes to 1812, America was no longer a newborn baby, especially with the purchase of Louisiana, especially with this influx of immigrants, right? And along with the industrialization and market revolution, America's economy was booming. So to a point, America believed, no, enough is enough. Britain constantly break their promise, right? At first, Britain, upon signing the Jay's Treaty, remember, Britain promised they would stop harassing American commercial boat, right? But did Britain stop? No, they continue to harass, right? And then the Napoleon War even make the situation worse, right? Not just Britain, most Europeans warship was like constantly being seen at the coast of Europeans west coast, right? And that's Atlantic Ocean, and among which definitely British warship, right? And they kind of upgrade their harassed upon Americans' commercial boat. So to a point, we have war hawks like Henry Clay, John Calhoun. These 2 name ring any bell? Henry Clay, John Calhoun. We talked about them before. Henry Clay, John Calhoun, who are they? Yes, Ria?
Wasn't John Calhoun like the guy who wanted South Carolina to nullify the Tariff Act, and he was the vice president?
Yes, that's him. But he was not the vice president yet, right? Because now it's 1812. We time travel back. Okay, thank you. Good job. How about Henry Clay? Henry Clay?
Wasn't he the guy that Jackson sent to negotiate with John Calhoun?
Yes, that's him. All right. So time travel back to 1812. These 2 are actually kind of like, comrades. But who knows? Later on, a decade later, they will be confronting each other. Okay. But now, Henry Clay and John Calhoun, they're known as war hawk. War hawk is like enough is enough. Okay, we're gonna uphold our stance, right? And we're gonna protect our nation's dignity. So we should side with France and declare war upon Britain, right? And then as a result, this war hawk, they won, all right? They decide, they eventually America sided with the France and declared war upon Britain, all right? When this war hawk proposed that we need to declare war upon Britain, they did not have the majority to support. But later on, remember the Embargo Act, 1807? Thomas Jefferson ratified that, right? And hindered Americans' economy. So to a point, his own Secretary of State disagreed with him, right? And he's a Secretary of State, later became president, right? The 4th president. So James Madison, as soon as he secured the office, right? You know what he did? He removed Embargo Act right away. All right, and then replaced with the what we call Non-Intercourse Act. Non-Intercourse Act. So this Non-Intercourse Act is what America will open up their port, but America will avoid the encounter with British warship. So America will renavigate, right, their travel route, and then instead of like arriving Britain or France, they could arrive from where? From like Netherlands, okay, or like where? Or like Norway, okay. So America would redirect their trading route, okay, to avoid Britain. But despite of that, Britain still chase after Americans' commercial boat, right? So that really provoked this the Doves, right? So the Doves is like, no, we don't want war. Peace is better. So eventually America declared war upon Britain. That's known as the War of 1812. All right, so the War of 1812 referred to this, also known as James Madison's War, because that happened during his presidency. Also known as the Second Independent War, because after this war, in 1815, Britain surrendered. Okay, it not really surrender, but appeal to America for a peace negotiation. Right, so whoever initiate this proposal will be considered as the defeated party. Right, so 1815, the war ends. All right, with this Ghent Treaty that ends this War of 1812. Right, and why is called the Second Independent War? Is that ever since this end of War of 1812, Britain never harassed America again, never. Because to Britain, it's like, not worth it, really not worth it, right? And ever since 1815, ongoing, America entered this era called the era of good feeling. The era of good feeling. Why? It kind of makes sense though, because 1815, America defeated Britain, right? For the second time. So the Americans, they feel so proud of themselves, right? We defeat the mighty empire, right? Not once, but twice, right? Plus, America's economy was growing, right? And plus, America become an ideal country for the world immigrants, right? Immigrants from the world. So this kind of achievement make America feel so proud of themselves. So, and American identity was established. All right, and this this kind of a nationalism, okay, was then started to emerge in American society. All right, that's why we call this era the era of good feeling, the era of good feeling, right? Not to mention America constantly explore the West, right? And all this epic heroic story, right? Further, aid this good feeling about being an American, right? Well, so James Madison, okay, he won over this War of 1812, super popular. So if he wanted, he can be the third term, okay? He can secure the third term, but he did not. So he retired in 1816, right? So 1816, presidential election, who won? Whoever James Madison endorsed, right? And that would be James Monroe, right? So Monroe, he became the 5th president of the United States, right? And during his presidency, Americans actually shift their focus from politics to expansion of the West. Why is that? Because before Monroe, we have 16 years under Democratic Republicans rule, right? And both presidents before Monroe, they were from Virginia, right? So the Federalist Party already was considered as irrelevant, right? Almost being marginalized, right? So when Monroe take over the office, he did not need to, worry about the opposite political parties, interfere with his policy. No, because Federalists, they gradually lose their power, their influence in the government, right? So that means Monroe could focus on expansion of the West, right? And that also aid this, era of good feeling. No more political conflicts. The entire country focus on expanding the West, all right? And that definitely will help this economic growth, right? And what else did Monroe do? Let's talk about this one first. Okay, Monroe Doctrine. He went into the office in 1816, right? And by 1823, towards the end of his second term, he actually declared this Monroe Doctrine. Monroe Doctrine, very important. Okay, I guarantee you're gonna see this in APUSH, right? Monroe Doctrine indicates that America is America. Here, America refers to the whole continent, right? So America is America. Europe is Europe, right? So if Europeans try to manipulate, this domestic matters in any American states, okay, or even attempt to colonize any other American land, United States will stand up and defend, okay, this nation, okay, because America is United States is part of this America, right? So you sense something changed, right? George Washington declared neutrality towards this French issue, right? John Adams too. And Thomas Jefferson imposed this embargo act, right? And James Madison at first tried to avoid the war, right, with Britain, but eventually the war took over in 1812, right, and America won. And now Monroe declared this Monroe Doctrine. The implied message is what? America, United States, has the responsibility to defend the entire continent, the whole America. So you see, America plays itself as the dominant power in the whole American continent. So from a, baby, infant, try to hide, with a closed door, to a point, have the courage to declare war again to their former mother country. Till now, America believe America is the big brother that share the duty, responsibility to protect the entire continent from Europe. So you see how Americans' role in the international stage gradually changed, right? From, no, we don't want to get involved, to you dare try, all right? So that's through Monroe Doctrine, right? So Monroe Doctrine, this kind of belief would continue to influence the future generation, all right? So to up to today, America still uphold this Monroe Doctrine, if you can sense that, all right? Not just, big brother of America. It's not kind of the big brother of the world, right? That's, some spirit like Monroe Doctrine, right? Okay, so that's what James Monroe did. On top of that, what else happened during this time period? Okay, we have a Missouri Compromise. Missouri Compromise. Okay, so basically what this Missouri Compromise was about, that westward expansion, right? Encourage immigrants to settle down in the West, right? And once you arrive in the West, you claim lands for free or pay very, small price for it. And then once your region, your territory, reach a certain population count, you enjoy your autonomy, right? And then when you are qualified, popular counts wise, right, as a state, then you can join the union, right? So here comes the issue, like we mentioned earlier. When the new state is formed and applied to join the union, what are you slavery or anti? They do care, right? Because that affect the total seats in House of Senate, right? So in this case, when Missouri was ready to join the union, all right, if you look at the map right here, Missouri right next to right next to Illinois, right? So Missouri will be considered, if not the North, at least the West, right? So should be anti-slavery, right? But what happened was the settlers came to Missouri. The majority happened to be large plantation business, all right? So the slavery system was already incorporated in Missouri's economic system, all right? So this big businessman, okay, of course, they want slavery system to remain, right? But geographic concern, they fit into anti-slavery territory, right? So in this case, the North and the South both fight for Missouri. Okay, the North says no, anti-slavery. South says no, pro, because that's their economic needs. And here comes Henry Clay. We're gonna see his name very often in this time period, all right? So Henry Clay, he was already a senator, right? Represent the West. He was from the West himself, right? So Henry Clay, he proposed a Missouri Compromise. And this proposal was introduced in year 1820. So we call this proposal Missouri Compromise 1820, all right? So Missouri Compromise 1820 suggests the following 3 items, all right, points. Point number 1, we need to deal with this issue right away. We cannot hinder Missouri's, development by denying their stateship, right? So Henry Clay proposed that since Missouri already practiced slavery and it become a core economic system, right? So if we deprive their right to practice slavery, we're gonna kill their economy. So Henry Clay argued that let us admit Missouri as a slavery state. And the North like, wait a second, no, that would unbalance this seats in the House of Senate, right? So Missouri Compromise number 1, Missouri, okay, join the Union as a slavery state. And number 2, Henry Clay said, worry not, here comes the solution. You care about the seats in the House of Senate, right? So how about that? Let's divide Massachusetts, all right? And I'll show you the rest of the map. So let's divide Massachusetts into 2. The north part right here of Massachusetts will become a new state called Maine, all right? So we would have a new state called Maine, all right? And Maine definitely will be a free state, right? Because it's a huge part of Massachusetts, right? So in this case, the North would have 2 additional seats in the House of Senate, right? So it's a tie, right? So point number 2 is to balance the seat in the House of Senate. Massachusetts will be divided into 2. A new state called Maine is created. And point number 3 is what? Henry Clay is very well-rounded thinker. He wants to prevent the same situation from happening in the future, right? So he established this divider. This divider is what? 36 degrees, 30 minutes, all right? 36 degree, 30 minutes parallel, right? So this divider will determine the later statehood, right? So in the future, whichever territory qualify as a state joining the union, if you're north of this divider, you are free state. Okay, no negotiation, right? In the south, slavery state. That's 36 degree, 32nd, all right? Oh, also there's a attachment. If the North have a state ready, right, want to join the Union, but the South hasn't, right? In this case, the North must wait because in the future, new states must join the Union by pair, Why? So that would not destroy the balance of the seats in the House of Senate, right? So this is the Missouri Compromise of 1820. So this compromise actually is pretty well-rounded, right? Not only it deal with the current problem, it also designed a system to prevent the same problem from happening again, right? So Henry Clay, because of this Missouri Compromise, he became a well-known politician, right? And later on, he will try to run for presidency, right? Okay, so this is Missouri Compromise 1820. That makes sense, right? So the era of good feeling, Missouri Compromise, Monroe Doctrine, okay? Key points between 1815 to 1824, right? Now let's see, 1824, James Monroe. He also followed George Washington's footsteps and he retired after his second term, all right? So now here comes to the election of 1824, right? So 1824 election, we have 4 candidates. Each one are so strong candidates. Let's take a look at them. First one is John Quincy Adams. Not only he was the oldest son of John Adams, he also was the Secretary of State to James Monroe, all right? So very seasoned politician, okay? With his father's endorsement and James Monroe's endorsement, right? So he stand very good chance in winning. Second, Henry Clay, he just came up with this Missouri Compromise in 1820. So his reputation is still there, right? So he seized the opportunity and run for presidency. And he was actually the House Speaker as well. Okay, House Speaker, very influential, all right? Third, Andrew Jackson, war hero, defeated Britain in 1815, later became a senator himself, all right? President, very likely will have the victory, all right? We have war hero, later become president in American history. War hero became American president. Anyone? War hero became became a president. Jeffrey, can you name one other than Andrew Jackson?
George Washington.
Of course, thank you. You heard the first one. That point to George Washington right away. Most students tend to forget George Washington was a war hero. He was, yeah. So George Washington, right? Andrew Jackson, who else? If you have a $50 banknote, look whose picture is on it. $50. Ulysses Grant, the one that won over the Civil War for the North. Ulysses Grant, right? Who else? Theodore Roosevelt. He actually fought in Spanish-American War, all right, and won, all right, and he became the president in 1902, okay, and so those are war hero, later became president, all right. So Andrew Jackson also stood very good chance in winning, right, war hero. And then we have Secretary of the Treasury, William Crawford, also very popular. Why? Because he was the Secretary of the Treasury, meaning what? He was in charge of money, right? And the economy was so good. So the Secretary of Treasury, of course, would be very well trusted and supported, right? So if you look at this year's election, 1824, oh man, the voters is gonna have a hard time choose from one from this 4. It's like everyone is so good, right? You don't know who you want to vote for, right? And that's the problem. As a result, none of these candidates receive majority vote, right? Because each of them have their own supporters, right? And none of them have majority. Whoops. So as a result, we have a runoff, right? So runoff is what? Remember the election in 1800, right? The top two was Thomas Jefferson and Burr, right? So runoff will be up to the Congress now, right? So round two, top two, whom? Top two is Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson. All right, Quincy Adams, Andrew Jackson. These two candidates make the way to top two. All right. So Henry Clay and William Crawford, thank you for your effort. See you next time, right? And this time it's up to the Congress, right? And look at Henry Clay. He was the House Speaker of the Congress. So he would be very influential in this runoff, right? And now he used his privilege, right, as a House Speaker and tried to negotiate with this top two candidates, okay, and see which candidate would, provide, benefits to Clay, right? If he somehow support one of these candidates, right? And then he decided to approach Quincy Adams first, because Andrew Jackson is a common man, right? So to Henry Clay said, we are not the same people. So he approached Quincy Adams and asked Quincy Adams, what if I can persuade my people to vote for you? Okay, and Quincy Adams understand right away, okay? Okay, and I also recognize your talent. Okay, I will recruit you in my cabinet, all right? And amongst these cabinet members, which one is most important? Secretary of the State. Secretary of the State, right? Because the Secretary of the State very likely would be the next presidential candidate. All right, because Secretary of State deals with domestic issue, right? Also represent America for this diplomat. Ever serve as a Secretary of State, you just wait and see. That would be the next president candidate. Okay, when the president served the second term, right? So if you look back, like what Jefferson's Secretary of State, James Madison, became the fourth president, right? Madison's Secretary of State, Monroe, became the fifth. Monroe's Secretary of State, Quincy Adams, almost there, you see. Bill Clinton's Secretary of State, not Bill Clinton, Obama's Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, almost, okay, but she did run for the election, you see. So when the next election, that will be Joe Biden, okay. So Joe Biden will continue to represent Democrats in 2024. If he wins the election, and then you just wait and see whoever is in this cabinet serve as Secretary of State, that would be the next candidate, Democratic Party support, all right? So Henry Clay was like, all right, so you want me to be in your cabinet, what position, right? And Quincy Adams was a very, seasoned politician, so he knew, okay, that I will arrange for that, right? So because of that, Henry Clay persuade his people to vote for Quincy Adams, and of course, Quincy Adams, won, right? And Andrew Jackson, he did not started a riots or whatever. He was like, congratulations, Mr. President, right? And but he had his moment, right? But later on, when Quincy Adams announced his members in his cabinet, and the name Henry Clay pop out, right? And Andrew Jackson realized something. This is a corrupt bargain, for sure, right? Corrupt bargain, right? So the term corrupt bargain was created, and it become a trend all the way till today, right? Corrupt bargain. So if you want me to back off, right, and persuade my people to support you, what's the catch? What do I get? That's corrupt bargain, right? So that's 1812 election, 1812 election, right? So, well, Quincy Adams became the 6th president, right? And like father, like son, he served 1 term as well. So father and son together served 2 terms, right? So during Quincy Adams' presidency, America continued to expand the westward expansion, right? So here, we're gonna focus on the tension over slavery between the North and South during this era. As the new states formed, right? The North and the South, they have, stronger opinion against each other, right? So the conflict of slavery between the North and South intensified. So 1789, when America was first established, actually slavery states outnumber the free state, including New York. There was a slave, right? And then by 1800, pretty much even, right? 9 versus 8. 1812, starting from Missouri Compromise from this year on, you see, it's what, 50-50, right? 12-12, 13-13, 13-13, right? So by the year of 1846, even though the North and the South still have their opinion, okay, towards each other, but at least this Missouri Compromise works, right? It maintained the peace between the North and the South, right? But this peace will be undermined soon, because 1846, what happened? Mexican-American War happened. Recall class meeting 1? We talk about the American South territory expansion, right? So 1846, because of Texas issue, Mexico declared war upon America, right? And then 2 years later, Mexico kind of appeal to the peace negotiation, right? So as a result, America not only justified the annexation of Texas, but at the same time, annex more land from Mexico, right? So this actually lead to another issue. The issue is what? California issue, okay? We'll save that for later, okay? But through this map, you see how this slavery issue could be controlled through this Missouri Compromise, okay? Until California was ready to join the Union, right? So that brings to this question, why? Why the North and the South had this big problem against each other over slavery? Ria, what do you think?
I think because the South relied a lot on slavery due to them farming for their farms and stuff, and the North didn't really need them because they had factory workers.
So this is an economic concern, right? So from economic perspective, the North is manufacturing industry, right? The South is large scale plantation. Very good. Okay. Jeffrey, can you think of a second reason? You're there, Jeffrey?
Sorry, my mind just blanked for a second. That was I didn't hear what you were asking about.
What's the main factors that lead to this conflicts over slavery issue between the North and the South?
Economy.
Mm-hmm.
Because the South's economy is dependent on slavery, whereas the North's economy is, well, not dependent on slavery. So when the North decides that they don't like slavery and they want slavery gone, it really it doesn't affect them, but it affects the South, which is why the South was not a big fan of the idea.
Sunny, yeah?
Didn't the North think that it was unconstitutional because the slaves were people and they had the same rights?
Exactly. That would be what? This political ideology, right? So political ideology also determine why the North is anti-slavery. All right, Bonnie, do you have any additional? We have economy, we have political ideology. Are you there? Okay. Huh?
Yes, I see.
The what? Okay. Can you try to adjust the volume of a microphone? Because I can hear the background noise when you're talking. So try to adjust your volume of the microphone lower. Maybe that will help to avoid the background noise. All right, but so far we have two reasons. One is economy, one is political ideology, of course. Right, so here we have a comparison. Okay, this one is also possible SAQ question, right? Based on like, two sources, and then we have different opinion towards slavery, and then based on the source ask you to describe the difference and similarity and specific historical development that lead to this conflicts between the North and South. Possible SAQ question, right? So the North, like you said, manufacturing, right? So they did not rely on slavery as their labor force. They can hire free labor, right? And then that's from the business point of view, right? But from the workers' point of view, okay, they believe if the North adopts slavery, that's gonna threaten their job opportunity. Because once slavery is adopted by the North, they gonna compete for jobs with the slaves. A slave is just one-time investment and you own this slave forever, right? And then how can you compare against a free labor? All right. Also the ideology part. New England, right? So New England is the descendant from this Mayflower passengers, right? Puritans or Protestant, right? So they came to America for equality, freedom, democracy, right? So this kind of ideologies become, rooted in the New England society, right? So they believe that Constitution guarantee this American citizens' right, right? And Declaration of Independence also indicate that all men are created equal, right? So New England have this strong ideology to defend not only a Constitution, but also American belief, right? And then the South, agriculture is the main economic practice, right? And on top of that, cotton industry started to grow, okay? Because in Europe, the industrialization actually increased the productivity of textile, all right, clothes. And the raw material is cotton, right? So the demand for cotton increased as well. So the profit is there, right? So more businessmen or landowner, they join this cotton industry. So what? So the demand for slaves increase, all right? And number three is because of Whitney's cotton gin, okay, in 1793. So Whitney's cotton gin was invented, right? So with this Whitney's cotton gin, you can view that as sort of kind of Americans a part of Americans market revolution, okay? So we have this cotton gin, this machine to replace human labor in weaving. So once you have the cotton harvest, right, you're gonna make the cotton into what? Threads, right? Thread. So that from there you can use the cotton thread to weave into cotton cloth, and then from cotton cloth you can use that to manufacture clothes, right? So with this cotton gin, replace human labor in which step of production? The weaving part, right? So that again reduce the cost of production and by increasing the productivity, right? So once the productivity increase, the cost of production decrease, that means what? Profit increase, right? So when profit increase, more people join this industry, right? That is what, that's the market price. Draw the supply curve to the right, right? Also, in the South, they deeply believing that slaves were personal property. Remember the very first successful colony in the South? Jamestown, Virginia, was actually established by London Company. So their agenda, their motivation is profit, all right? So to maximize our profit, we purchase slaves. What's wrong with that, right? So that's the problem between the North and South, right? All right. But yesterday we went through this Andrew Jackson, right? Now here, Andrew Jackson, right? And the year came to 1848. All right. Well, it's not like exactly 1848. In 1840-ish, right? This movement started to took place. It's called the Second Great Awakening. This is the second, right? That means there was a first. Anybody recall when was the first Great Awakening and what it was about? The first Great Awakening. Anybody recall? Yes, Ria?
I don't really remember when the date was. But wasn't it when like enlightenment was introduced and stuff?
Not really. Okay.
Oh,
Enlightenment, yeah, enlightenment, that would be the time period of eve of revolution. Right. So first Great Awakening. Don't recall? Remember Anne Hutchinson, the midwife of Harvard University? That's first Great Awakening. And the year was 1740-ish, right? So that's the time the colonial, that's back to the colonial era, right? So the colonial church in New England, they were being like a defeated despite the exiled and Hutchinson, but they decided what? To establish schools to educate their clergies, right? That's the first Great Awakening, right? So that Great Awakening is like, church started this reform and once again promote religious belief, the importance of religion, all right? Now, 1 century later, okay, 1 century later in 1840, America idea, right? And encourage people, okay, to find their belief back. What do you mean to to find their belief? Because by 1814, America was in the process of industrialization, market revolution, right? So these kind of economic growth will easily shake people's belief system, right? So back to the agriculture society, life were much simpler, right? Families spend time together 24/7, right? Because they're farming families, right? So they have the stronger connection with each other as family, and they go to church together, right? But when market revolution, industrialization took place, people are busy generating profit, right? And new social class formed, middle class, working class, right? And workers, they work at the factory, right? So they do not spend 24/7 with their family anymore. Most likely, families only get together for a very brief period of time daily, because the workers that time they work at least 10 or 12 hours. All right. So when they get home, they're tired, exhausted, right? So they have dinner together, maybe, perhaps, all right? and then they probably really talk to each other. How's your day? Yeah, pretty good. How's your day? All right, good night. All right. So this connection within family gradually decline, not to mention people's connection with God, right? So church believed that this is bad. Remember George Washington, his farewell address, right? He emphasized the importance of religion, right? So in this case, church started this second great awakening. That's the time church decided to promote the religious practice to the American society. Okay. But this time they are more civilized. The first time they use what? Threats, right? If you don't believe in God, your afterlife, you go to hell, right? But this time they will invite their church members to share their experience, their encounter, okay, their story after they join the church, and how this religious belief changed their life. All right. So that's the second great awakening. All right. So the very same time period, 1840, right? Second great awakening, parallel with the social reform. All right. So the church, while the church tried to promote the religious practice, the society also are awakened. Okay. Awakened about what? They realize this industrialization, market revolution, right, westward expansion somehow, guide America to a very weird development. What happened to this American spirit, right? Help each other when needed, right? But now people tend to like a distance from each other as the economy grow, but the connection within the society somehow, become distant. So social reform is a group of activists. They rise up and point out what America's problem was because of this, industrialization, yeah, and this capitalism, right? And the major force in this social reform would be women, all right? So this social reform, you can have a equal sign equals to women's movement. All right. So women's movement, this will be considered as wave one. Wave one. And it started in 1848 officially. Why? Because if you look at the photo, camera was invented around 1840. So starting from 1840, you will see photos instead of painting as a historical documents. So these two lady, the sitting one is Elizabeth Stanton. And the standing one is Susan Anthony, right? These two are the pioneer of women's movement, all right, and they're partners in this movement. Susan Anthony, it's a very sophisticated writer. So she will write the speech for Elizabeth Stanton, because Elizabeth is a very, how should I say that? She's a very good speaker, public speaker. She knows exactly how to appeal to the general public. They appeal to pathos, how to navigate or manipulate her audience feeling, right? So Susan read the speech and then Elizabeth delivered the speech, right? So on their agenda to-do list, okay, women's movement wave one to-do list includes number one, abolish slavery, right? The reason why women's movement would promote the idea of abolish slavery is easy to understand, because slaves would be considered as social minority, right? And women is also the social minority, right? So minority help minority. Together, their voice is bigger, stronger. advocate feminism. When you see feminism, it equals to suffrage, right? So suffrage is women's right to vote, right? Women's right to vote. Temperance is what? Temperance indicates that it associates with the social issue, alcohol consumption, right? So women promote the idea that American government should abolish or ban the manufacturing of alcohol and punish any stores that try to sell alcohol, because women believe that all the social problem can be traced back to this overconsumption of alcohol, right? Because it's in this, industrialized era, capitalism was the major economic system, right? And this will lead to social wealth gap. Workers, they make minimum wage, right? And they work such a long hour, okay, and just enough to support his own family, right? So they will have this, burden and, this constant emotional reaction. So only way to get rid of this negative feeling is through consuming alcohol. So workers will use their money, their wage, okay, to the bar and, drink themselves to drunk, all right? And of course they will drink like, whatever is cheapest, like a beer, right? So this middle class women, they could not believe why this worker class, they will waste their money this way. And then the consequence of a drunk man could be like, fight, right? Or what? A domestic violence, right? Abuse the wife or abuse their children, right? And worst of all would be like committed crime, right? Robbery, murder even, okay? So women believe all the problem of social issue derived from the consumption of alcohol. So they promote the idea of temperance, all right? And then we have education dissemination. Okay, women did not have the right to be educated like men. Remember Republican motherhood from the multiple choice question? Republican motherhood is like, women, you don't need to go to school. Your job is to produce the qualified generation for America, okay? So you need to teach your children American spirit, okay? So women was like, no. Women, if women have the right to be educated, the contribution women can make to this country is beyond your imagination. So women believe that education dissemination is a must. Advocate feminism when 1920, the 19th Amendment granted women's right to vote. Temperance, 1919, with the 18th Amendment, the government actually banned the manufacturing and selling of alcohol. Education dissemination when? You're gonna wait till mid early 20th century. Okay, so that's the Great Awakening paired with social reform. All right. Also, in this time period, we have another movement, also parallel with this Second Great Awakening women's movement. That is the American Renaissance. So American Renaissance is what? All these great poets, authors, thinkers, right? They started to publish the work that can really represent America. Before this American Renaissance, Americans mainly read literature work from Britain or from Europe, right? But now they have their own American novel, American poet, right? So among which we have Ralph Waldo Emerson. Anybody know about him? Emerson? Anyone? Emerson?
Wait. This is the guy who wrote Nature and
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
a transcendentalist who believed in was it everybody being connected through
Mm-hmm.
like the yeah.
That's him. Yeah. He's the founder of this ideology called transcendentalism, right? So basically, like kind of like a Chinese Taoism, right? Chinese Confucianism appealed to the harmony amongst men. Taoism appealed to the harmony between human and nature, right? So transcendentalism promote the idea, okay, of the harmony between human and nature, and that addressed directly to what? Industrialization, right? Because industrialization, as a result, is the overutilize of nature resource. So at that point, 1840-ish, some American thinkers already had the concern about the possible impact industrialization will, harm the American society or even the world as a whole, right? So they're pretty like, advanced, and radical thinker. While others, they enjoy the achievement of industrialization, they started to worry about the negative impact, right? That's him, Emerson. So he also promote the idea that is like what? Your future, okay, your future is beyond possibility, right? So if you believe or like you want to, okay, change your career, you can always do so. Doesn't matter which life stage you're in, okay? Just follow your heart. So he has a big fan called Thoreau, David Thoreau. He is the author of the book called Walden. Walden, this book used to be College Board's favorite for SAT reading. Lately, I haven't seen this, this passage related to Walden yet, but used to be the favorite. All right. So Walden was a prose, all right, written by Thoreau. He was a student at Harvard University, and he was a believer of this transcendentalism. So follow your heart, right? Everything is possible. So Thoreau dropped himself off from Harvard and moved to this Walden. Walden is a pond, and lived this, isolation life, okay, and self-sufficient lifestyle away from civilization, okay. And for 2 years he lived there, and he built his own hut, grow his own food, right? And during that 2 years he write his diary, okay, sort of, and then he collect his diary and always his thoughts, and he published this book called Walden. So basically this book is about the concern of industrialization as well, right? And then with Whitman, Leaves of Grass, the great poets, right? Whitman. During the French Revolution, there's one very prominent figure, a French general, actually aid American Revolution personally. That was Marquis Lafayette. Do you know him? Marquis Lafayette. There are actually buildings and street named after him, like Lafayette Avenue, Lafayette Boulevard, Lafayette Plaza. Okay, that Lafayette. He actually recruit 5,000 men and sail to America and accompany George Washington to the end of America's Revolution. So he was considered as like Americans hero, all right? And Americans speak highly about Marquis Lafayette. When he decided to do so, he was only 19 years old. He was a noble in France, and he believed in America's democracy. So he decided to use his own money to help America. When his King Louis XVI, signed this treaty with America, Treaty of Commerce, Treaty of Amity, right? So Lafayette, he actually traveled back in his later age when he was like close to 70 years old. So that time was James Monroe James Monroe was the president. So Monroe actually welcomed him in person at the New York port. And there a big crowd of American people. They want to thank this, this hero that helped America to fight in this Revolutionary War, right? So when Lafayette got off the boat and he walked through the crowd, right? And he randomly picked up a little boy and kissed this little boy on his forehead. And this little boy turned out to be Whitman. That's him, the very same Whitman, right? And he grew up into a great poet. Right. Melville, he would be known as the American Shakespeare. He is the author of Moby Dick. Any of you read this book, Moby Dick? It's a novel. Moby Dick, if anybody asks you, which book can best represent American literature, 9 out of 10 will tell you Moby Dick. Moby Dick, right? So Moby Dick is reflecting the society back then. So it's about, escaped slaves in the North, still afraid that would be captured by their former master. And if that happened, the punishment awaits will be beyond your imagination. So escaped slaves, even though they're in the North, free land, right? But they didn't want to risk that being captured, right? So they're willing to enlist themselves to this whale hunting business. So whale hunting was like, very risky, life-threatening business, okay? But even so, these escaped slaves, they believe risking their life against Mother Nature and the biggest mammal on Earth is even better than risking their life on land if they are captured by their former owner, right? So that's how this book represents the social problem. Okay, so through this book, Melville imply or send a message to American society. What message? Slavery is brutal. To what extent? Escaped slaves, they're willing to risk their life in the sea, okay, other than stay on land, right? And Hawthorne, another great writer, the Scarlet Letter, right? So this Scarlet Letter is addressing to which social problem? Racial discrimination, right? So we have this Know Nothing Party, right? They're against immigrants, right? So the Scarlet Letter, racial discrimination. Moby Dick, slavery problem, right? And then Walden and Emerson, concerned about industrialization. So through study literature work, you will learn more about how the society was like back then, all right? So that's why in your history class, you may have assigned a reading material that is actually literature work. And your literature class, you will be studying, different age, different eras work, right? And before your teacher introduced that book, your teacher give you a historical contextualization of the society, also the upbringing of the author, because with the contextualization, you can better appreciate that work, right? Okay. Now, okay, this painting. Anybody seen this painting before? It's very popular in APUSH exam. This painting concludes this westward expansion, okay? And westward expansion concluded with a concept called manifest destiny. Manifest destiny. So what is manifest destiny? Basically, it's what? America is the God-chosen one. God sent America to the West to improve Indians' life, to bring in civilization. So if you look at this painting, you will see this floating lady represent America, so semi-god, right? And in her right arm, she's holding a book, and her left hand, she's grabbing cable, right? So book indicates education. Cable indicates technology. And you see, whatever she fly through, behind her is bright, right? and in front of her is dark. That's how we decipher this painting, right? Focus on the center. So why we have a floating lady? She's Miss America, right? Miss Columbia, all right? And then she represents knowledge. She brings knowledge and technology. That means America brings in education and civil and technology, right, to the West. And West was the home to Indians. If you look here, dark, right? Everybody in the dark is Indians. In the bright, in the light is Americans. Yeah. And then you also see trends, right? So after you decipher the center of the painting or photo, you go to the next layer. So next layer, I see the contrast between bright and dark. And bright, we have railroad, industrialization, right? Americans, right? In the dark, we see Indians, right? So we understand what it's trying to say, right? So wherever America arrives, civilization follows, right? And that explains the concept of manifest destiny, right? So this concept was introduced by authors and reporters in around 1840-ish, right? And this is actually a ideology created to justify Americans' action upon Indians, because Indians, they suffer the most during this Americans westward expansion, right? So here came American, and Indians, you have to yield and move and relocate, okay? To a point, they move all the way to Wyoming, Montana, okay? And so America could utilize this fertilized land, right? So this is the westward expansion. Okay, we ended with this concept called manifest destiny, right? So we finished westward expansion. So now next we're gonna talk about this Civil War, antebellum era, that's prior to the Civil War, and then the end of the Civil War, start a new chapter of Reconstruction, all right? So let's take a break. When we come back, we'll start this Mexican-American War to introduce the textualization for Civil War, all right? So let's take a break. Let's take 10, all right? We're back. Not yet. Thank you, Ria. Welcome back. Sunny, Jeffrey. Thank you, Sunny. Jeffrey? Not yet. Welcome back. All right. So, we have a snowstorm plus windstorm today. So we have a wind gust, could reach like 50 miles an hour in New York. And actually this morning there was a, power shortage due to that. And fingers crossed we can go through this class without power shortage, all right? But we're almost there. All right, so the Mexican-American War. We already know that when we talk about the American territorial acquisition, right? So this Mexican-American War is the result of this Texas issue, right? So Mexico claimed its independence in 1821, right? So look at the year, 1821, Mexico become independent, right? What 2 years later, Monroe Doctrine was declared, right? So when Mexico declared its independence, America was like, Europeans' influence in America is gradually declining, right? So it's time America stand up for themselves. Okay, so we have 1823 Monroe Doctrine. All of a sudden makes sense, right? And then Mexico claimed its independence in 1821, and then Texas later on claimed its independence in 1836, right? Then we talk about when Texas claimed its independence, they right away turned to America and appeal to join the Union, right? And that brings to this Texas issue, right? Okay, so this Texas issue is what Andrew Jackson refused, deny the Texas appeal, right? And decide not to annex Texas. Then what happened was the election of 1844, right? So this election, we mentioned these two candidates. Looks familiar to you? Henry Clay. So Henry Clay, 1820, Missouri Compromise, make him super popular. And then 1824, he ran for president. He lost the corrupt bargain. He became the Secretary of State, right? So he tried to run, but 1828, not his term yet, because Quincy Adams want to run for second term, but Quincy Adams lost to Andrew Jackson. So pretty much, yeah, it's a kissing goodbye for Henry Clay. But he came back in 1844. He did, right? So when he came back in 1844, he was supposed to win, because by 1844 he was considered as like a very experienced politician, and he was a Westerner, right? Self-made, not really self-made, but his Westerner kind of represent the new American spirit, right? But he refused to answer to the question about Texas issue, okay? Because between these two are the top two candidates, James Polk and Henry Clay. So none of them received majority in electoral college vote, right? And popular vote doesn't really count because they count the electoral vote, right? So well, when the Congress try to choose a president, they care most about Texas issue, right? And then Henry Clay refused to answer that question, and James Polk promised will 1846, the war followed, right? And the war ended in 1848, right? And then as a result, America claimed even more land from Texas, right? So the one in green, this one. And later, the gains and purchase, we'll talk about that in the acquisition, right? So see, much easier now. Okay, so America claimed this land, and among which California soon discovered the deposit of gold, right? And this would be significant because whole bunch Americans, including even includes the foreign immigrants, they rush into California to what? To dig gold, right? So gold rush. Okay. So gold rush is also, you can consider gold rush as like, another wave of influx of immigrants, right? So this wave of influx of immigrants mainly from Asia, Latin America, not Europe, okay? Asia and Latin America. So Asian from China, especially along the Guangdong, Guangxi coast, right? So they came to California through their voyage across Pacific Ocean, right? And Latin America, easier, right? They can come to America and right? So California soon qualify to apply for its statehood, right? Because all these immigrants, right? And then here comes the issue. What issue? The issue is the California wanna join the state, right? But what's the statehood, the nature of it? Is California going to be a free state or slavery state? Is it, don't we have Missouri Compromise? Yes, we do. But Missouri Compromise, this 36 degrees seconds would divide California into half, right? So that's the problem right here. And then Henry Clay came up with this compromise of 1850. That would be his last compromise in his political career, though. And this compromise was the the least favored compromise. Okay, because it creates backfire, right? So this compromise goes like that. The Missouri Compromise will not work on California's case. So let's forget about it. And Henry Clay proposed that since California is not a large plantation state, right? And people there does not really need slavery, right? So let's admit California as a free state, right? And it sounds like, why? A big portion of California is in the South, right? So what do we get? And Henry Clay came up with this Fugitive Slave Act. This term sounds familiar, right? When do we see this term before? Anyone? Don't remember? We talked about this term before, and when we introduced this term, we actually emphasize on the year, 1793.
Was this the act that allowed the slave owners to chase their slaves up even if they were in the north?
Yes, but the first version in 1793 is different. How? Do you recall? Fugitive Slave Act in 1793 was ratified by George Washington, right? As a gesture to the South. Okay, we recognize your right to practice slavery, but this Fugitive Slave Act, the right to practice it is actually controlled by state government. Remember, state government instead of federal government. All right, so it does not really helping the slave owners in that case. All right. And then this compromise of 1850 kind of upgrade the 1793 version, right? So Fugitive Slave Act in 1850 give the right to exercise this law to the federal government. So now it doesn't matter where your slave, escaped to, as long as they're still within American territory. the slave owner can always appeal to the government to assist, right? That's one. Second is what? Second is, on top of that, the North, they are prohibited to help the escaped slave in any way. All right. So if the North try to assist, help the escaped slave, they will be committed with crime. All right. They'll be considered as committing crime. Okay. And then they could be sentenced to jail. Okay. And even worse, if you know any escaped slave, you are supposed to report them. You need to report them. If you don't report them, you violate the act. All right. So this compromise, this Fugitive Slave Act actually was like, strongly opposed by both the North and the South. So the North claimed that, hey, you are now using the law to what? To oppress our conscience. Helping out people, it's our human nature. And now I try to help others and you say I'm violating the law. Okay, and then the South also not happy because they argued that this Fugitive Slave Act was already, designed back in 1793, all right? And you just didn't care to really honor this act. Now you just change, amend this act and use that new version of act to trade for California. We don't think so. So this compromise of 1850 actually create backfire. Neither the North nor the South, they're happy about it, right? So as a result, you know what happened? The North treated their slaves even worse. Why? The South, I'm sorry. The South treated their slave even worse as like, a revenge to the North because they're our personal property. There's nothing you can do, okay, to prevent us from, abusing our slaves. And the North is like what? As long as the escaped slaves still residing within American territory, you cannot help them, right? So the North say, fine, we will help the escaped slave all the way to escape to Canada. So Canadian soil no longer under American government's jurisdiction. And sometimes they even help, escape slave to Europe, right? Like Douglas is one of them, right? So that's the backfire, right? So here, let's talk about the backfire, right? Among which we have the well-known, conductor of the Underground Railroad. Do we know her? Harriet Tubman?
Yeah.
Who's she? Harriet.
Didn't she help a bunch of slaves escape through the Underground Railroad?
Yes. And she later became an activist in the anti-slavery movement. And when the slavery was abolished, she was in a movement to fight for civil rights for, freed slaves. All right. And she was also on the $20 banknote. There are two, excuse me. There are two versions of $20. One is Andrew Jackson, one is Harriet Tubman. All right. Excuse me. So that's her. And she managed to escape to the North. Not just that, she also helped other slaves to escape. Right. So she caused big loss to the Southern slave owners. So to a point, she was wanted. There was like a big price for her head. But she was protected by the North and some white people in the South as well, right? Okay, now we have another prominent figure in this era. Have you read this book, Uncle Tom's Cabin? It probably is on your school's reading list.
I haven't read it, but I've heard about it.
Is it that on your reading list?
I don't know.
Should be. Okay. It's on the reading list to high school in Vancouver this year. So probably in the East Coast, you probably have that as well. So Uncle Tom's Cabin, the author Harriet Beecher Stowe. She was a housewife, and she wanted to help out this anti-slavery movement. But as a woman, okay, she was a minority already in the society, right? But she does something that she was good at. What? Writing. So she used her writing to convince the society that slavery is inhumane. So this book, Uncle Tom's Cabin, once it was published, it became the best-selling book in the entire America. If you say in the North, that's understandable, right? Because it's targeting slavery system. But this book was also popular in the South. How come? Because in her book, she did include a chapter showing how this slaves during their free time, the slaves did have free time. They have a Sunday afternoon off. All right. So that moment was the happiest moment to all slaves. They would have their little party and they share their culture, their cooking, their singing, their dancing. All right. So she did include this chapter in this book. So the South used this chapter as evidence, saying that says who? Slaves, they don't have a life. Look, they do. All right. So the South and the North, they just, selective choose whatever they want as evidence from this book, right? And you will see this political cartoon as well, all right? So conflicts of slavery continue. Douglas, Nebraska bill, okay? So Douglas, Nebraska bill is what? When Kansas and Nebraska, they are ready to join the Union to claim their statehood. And here comes the problem. Are they slavery or free state? And is it, can we just go back to the Missouri Compromise? If you look at the map right here, here, Kansas, Nebraska, right? So here we have Kansas, here we have Nebraska. If we use Missouri Compromise, definitely they are free state, right? But the problem is Kansas and Nebraska, they both practice this large scale plantation, and this big businessmen, they rely on slavery, right? So in this case, they definitely want join the Union as a slavery state, right? But the North, think otherwise. They believe they're a free state because they're in the North, right? But Kansas and Nebraska, they argue what? They argue that your Missouri Compromise was compromised in 1850. That kind of makes sense, right? So it's a tradition. If you have a new law that is contradicting the previous law, then when the new law ratified, it will replace the old one. So compromise of 1850 already ignore this divider of 36 degrees 30 seconds, right? That means Missouri Compromise is no longer powerful or available. So that kind of makes sense. So this is Kansas and Nebraska's their argument. So Douglas proposed that. It's not Henry Clay anymore, right? This time it's Douglas. Douglas is a senator of Illinois, right? And he proposed that, how about that? Let's forget about any form of compromise, all right? Let's have the people vote. Because after all, people know the best, right? What kind of government they want. So let's have the people vote what kind of statehood they want. And if it's really up to the people's vote, it should be free states. Okay. But remember this big business, big plantators, right? They cheated. They somehow recruit people from out of state and somehow managed to present them as the residents of Nebraska and Kansas. So with this all of a sudden new residents, right? Their vote outnumber the free state. So as a result, Kansas and Nebraska become a slavery state, right? And these acts result in what we call bleeding Kansas. Bleeding Kansas. Okay, so what is bleeding Kansas? Let me show you. It's right here. This is bleeding Kansas. Do we know this figure, John Brown? There's actually a mini series. I think it's produced by HBO. It's John Brown. Okay, so John Brown, he is a white man against slavery. So you know what he did? He would target slave owners. If he knew any slave owners like abuse, torture their slaves, right? And he would do the same thing to the slave owners. If the slave owner somehow, cut off one arm of the slave, and he would cut off the arm of the slave owner. That's him. And then that's before the Nebraska-Kansas Act. But when this act was ratified, he was furious. So to a point, he actually recruited people along with his own sons. He had 5 sons, right? You know what they did? They raid on the Kansas state government's militia and try to steal the gunpowder. Okay, that's something else, right? If you just target slave owner, the government can pretend they did not see anything. But you are raiding the state government's warehouse of all this gunpowders, right? It's treason. So the militia, okay, was called to confront John Brown, and all his 5 sons were killed right before his eyes, and he was arrested, and then he was put on trial, and he was sentenced to death because he committed treason, right? So that's John Brown. He's bleeding Kansas, right? So you see the tension between the North and the South used to be like, exist, but nobody want to talk about it, right? But now it's become like a physical confrontation, and all because this compromise of 1850, all right? And now we have the Lincoln's Republican. Remember we talked about that? 1854, Whig Party divided, right? And the Whig Party disintegrated, right? So their member either joined this know-nothing anti-immigrants, or they created this one called Republican Party. Okay, this know-nothing, also known as American Party. If you see American Party, it's the same thing like a know-nothing, right? And Republican Party also was created. And Republican Party was very clear about their stance towards slavery. It's anti-slavery, all right? So Republicans soon become the biggest political party in the North because they clearly indicate their attitude towards slavery, all right? So here comes Lincoln. So Lincoln joined this Republican Party, right? And in 1858, he was running for senator from Illinois. That's his hometown. So if you are in Illinois, you will see their car license plate with the word saying Lincoln's state. So Illinois is known as Lincoln's state because his hometown is in Springfield, Illinois, right? So in 1858, he ran for senator representing Illinois, okay? But the incumbent senator was Stephen Douglas, right? The very same Douglas proposed the Kansas-Nebraska Act, that one, this gentleman right here, that's him, Douglas, right? So Douglas was an incumbent senator. So Lincoln was trying to compete against him, all right? And then they have this, a series of debate, all right? And their debate at first circulating slavery issue, but later on became what? Became the question about how big a federal government we want. Does the federal government have the power, the right to interfere state government's business? All right. So it become a debate over, again, the interpretation of Constitution. Makes sense? So that's the Lincoln-Douglas debate. And during this debate, Lincoln clearly indicate that one country should have one system. That's a united country. America, it's a divided United States. So he believed slavery issue should be dealt with, right? So during his campaign for this senator election, he actually make himself really, really well known because he's not afraid to indicate his stance towards slavery, even though he's more focused on, Constitution, but, he talked about slavery issue anyway. And then he's tall. He's one of the tallest president in America. He's tied with Lyndon Ben Johnson, right? So Lincoln and Johnson, they're both 6'4". And then so he's tall and he has this sideburn and beard, so it's easy to recognize him. All right, so he made himself well known to the American public, right? Despite he lost the election in 1858, but he came back. He came back in 1860, running for the president, right? And by then, this anti-slavery movement become more severe, and Lincoln running for president, of course he would have most of the support in the North, right? And when Lincoln was nominated as the candidate to represent Republican, the South was like no way, right? Because Lincoln made it clear America could not be a divided United States. Slavery issue must be dealt with. All right? So the North nominate Lincoln, and you know what the South did? The South denied Lincoln's candidacy. So meaning what? On the election day, Lincoln's name was not even on the ballot in the South. So even if you want to vote for Lincoln, you couldn't. His name was not there, right? But despite of that, Lincoln won the election anyway. How come? First of all, the South, their population is composed mainly by slaves. And slaves, they did not have the right to vote, right? So the eligible voters in the South was outnumbered to begin with, right? Number two, the South somehow came up with 3 candidates. So they actually, divided these votes on their own. And Lincoln, even though he got 0 votes from the South, he still win the election because pretty much all the North electoral college vote goes to Lincoln. All right. So Lincoln won the election in 1860. And the election, American president's election, is always on the first Tuesday after the first Monday. It's confusing, right? In November. First Tuesday after first Monday of November. All right. Let me show you how come this is confusing. Can you see this calendar here? I'm not sure if you can. So if you look at November calendar of this year, right? The first Monday is November 7th, right? So even though November 1st is the Tuesday, right? But it's not after the first Monday, so it's not the election day. And the first Monday in November is November 7th. That make the election day this year for the midterm election November 8th, right? So anyway, that's how Americans' election was designed, right? So November, Lincoln won the election, right? And he would inaugurate into the office the following January, right? But before he inaugurated himself into the office, December, the South ceded from the Union already. All right, so the South on December 17th ceded from the Union. led by South Carolina. Right, led by South Carolina. And this session from the Union, it's kind of like, serve as a gesture to deny Lincoln's victory in election. So South Carolina, all the 7 states here in green, they ceded United States and formed their very own government. And the government is called the Confederate States of America. All right, the Confederate State of America. They have their own government, their own president, their own national flag, their own national anthem, the whole package. All right, the first and last president, Confederate States of America had was Jefferson Davis of Mississippi. Okay, Jefferson Davis. Right. So Lincoln, despite Lincoln's appeal to the South, Lincoln's argument is, note yourself, is his idea towards slavery is called contentment. Contentment. So contentment indicates what? Lincoln's idea is number one, first of all, he's going to abolish slave trade once for all. So you can no longer purchase and sell slaves. All right. But what happened to the pre-existing slaves? Too bad, you're still slaves. All right. But their children, if they have children in the future, their children will be considered as free men because they are born on this free land. Okay. So no more slaves source, right? Because you cannot buy them. And your slaves' children, they're free men. So you cannot claim the children of your slaves as personal property anymore, right? And then on top of that, Lincoln planned to do so. The pre-existing slaves still maintain their slaveryhood, right? So the South would not have strong impact on their economy right away, right? And at the meantime, okay, for all the slaves to die out, at least we're talking half a century, right? The North during this half a century will help out the South to industrialize. So in this case, gradually America will be slave-free. That's his idea called contentment. So Lincoln promised contentment, but the South says, sure, you promised that now, but once you inaugurate to the office, you will do something else. We don't trust you. That's why the South insists they want to cede the Union, right? So we're almost done with Civil War, right? And the Reconstruction is not in this chapter. It will be the beginning of the next chapter, right? It's just a foreshadow because Reconstruction will be the aftermath of Civil War. So the war itself is not important. The logic is more important, right? So the cause effect of the war is what we want to focus on, all right? So let's stop here for today. And don't forget your homework, this short answer question. Okay, again, A, B, or C. Okay, but this time you need to refer to this text source, all right? And make sure you focus on A, assertion, E, evidence, and your reasoning, all right? And use third person point of view to address your idea, all right? And don't forget this evidence. So evidence from this source, but you want to incorporate with your knowledge in your reasoning. That makes sense? All right, questions, ladies and gentlemen? I assume that's a no. In that case, you have a nice weekend, and I will talk to you on Monday. All right. So we don't have a class over the weekend. So have a nice weekend. Talk to you next Monday. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Pleasure. Bye. Good night. Bye.